good. How are you, Ali? You're right.
Very good, very good, very good. Cool. So I thought we could start by just talking a little bit about this year's Accumulate project, which obviously has unfortunately been postponed due to the coronavirus crisis. And you were in production of a graphic novel that was made by people experiencing homelessness. And I just thought it would be good to start a little bit talking about that project and what's happening with it now, and how that's been kind of affected by the current situation.
That seems absolutely ages away. You know, when you started to talk about it, I thought, God, when was that? You know, because so much has happened. So basically, yeah, I mean, we started that project, which was, the project title was The Book of Homelessness. And you're right, it was a graphic novel that was going to be, and is going to be, completely created by people affected by homelessness. And the reason we wanted to do that was because when you look at a lot of creative content about people who have got experience of homelessness, it's often the non-homeless that are writing, photography, photographing, filmmaking, you know, whatever about that community, as if they're sort of stigmatized by the definition of their housing situation. So we wanted to pivot that and say, well, look, it's their story, and you know, we're going to enable them to tell it in whichever format they want for this graphic novel. And it doesn't have to be about being homeless, and that's often the obsession when the non-homeless interact with the homeless. It's like, why are you homeless? And then I thought to myself, well, they could write about what they had for breakfast. It doesn't really, you know, I don't really care if they wanted to, you know, draw that. But eventually people did start to delve deeper and to concentrate on those sorts of issues. And so we started that, I think it was the beginning of January, wasn't it? It was the beginning of January. It was very, very important as part of that project that we had a fixed location, that we weren't going from location to location. And, you know, an autograph was the obvious one for us. And that was about creating a sense of belonging, a sense of connection to a space, a sense of sort of identity with the space, and that they felt at home there and felt comfortable there. So that was all very, very critical. So those workshops ran weekly on a Tuesday afternoon. And we had 1 week where we did run the workshops every single day. And of course, come, I think it was March the 17th, ka-ching, no more workshops. You know, like we had to just literally close them. And we made that decision very, very quickly, for a number of reasons. The main one was about the safety of our participants and what they, you know, their own living circumstances and putting them at risk, etc. So we stopped it very, very suddenly, not really having a plan B in our back pocket, but literally saying we're stopping. And then, and then, you know, it was sort of like 2 hours later, I thought, well, hold on a minute. It's not just we're stopping workshops, we're stopping a lot of other things. We're stopping them being creative, engaging with each other, you know, progressing their learning, that sense of belonging, that progression, that, you know, all other stuff.
It would be really good to hear a little bit about how things changed for the people that you work with. So something that has been kind of in the news, and many politicians have been talking about this idea that the virus is a kind of leveler or affects people, or it doesn't discriminate. I think that was one of the kind of phrases that was used. And obviously you're working with people who are experiencing a very particular set of circumstances. And I was just wondering what kind of like insights you had into the lives of people who are experiencing homelessness during this current moment.
Yeah, you know what, it was really, obviously, you know, we'd worked with this group for, it must be about 15 weeks. I mean, it was a really long project that we were involved with. So you really get to know people, and then you sort of start to see them come every single week. You know, they're really engaging. You know, they had their own little tables, they were working with their own mates. And first of all, you know, so that was a very important factor to me, but also what you're trying to say about like discrimination. I mean, we all know it discriminates, right? I mean, well, I feel it does, because, you know, if you don't have somewhere safe to call your home, you are vulnerable anyway. And then you escalate that to say you're living in a shared accommodation with shared kitchens, shared bathrooms, shared communal spaces with people who you may not know necessarily. Your risks are far higher, your anxiety levels will be far greater, you know, that you're in isolation when you're already feeling particularly vulnerable and alone and lonely. And then you've got yourself isolating in a room, which isn't particularly great. Um, with that circumstance outside can only be detrimental and foster more negative experiences. And so and those experiences are not just to do with the loneliness and vulnerability. We're talking about mental health here, like really serious mental health stuff. You know, it only, you know, it sort of exaggerates how difficult your own life is, because it's impacted in such a way. And I mean, you know, if anybody's been in a hostel, you'll know that it's sort of run, it's quite institutionalized, you know what I mean? So, you know, a lot of choices are taken away from you. And even we are now collectively as a nation experiencing what it's like not to have choice about where we go, about what, you know, what we do, about how we work necessarily. So we're just experiencing, and everybody's going, oh, I can't go for my, you know, my Starbucks, you know, you know, when you think about that times, you know, 20 times 100, where you have that as your constant experience, and now it's compounded through this situation with COVID. So, you know, just the fact that you can leave your room to have your meals in the dining space, and you know, that's been taken away from you again. So it is really, really difficult. The other thing, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but they were reliant on, you know, donations coming from places like Pret and Eat, you know, like the next day sandwiches. Well, those dried up, you know what I mean? So then we had residents in hostels saying they have no food. So, you know, so there was all of that. And then on a personal level, what we experienced through the Accumulate project, you know, running the project with you guys at Autograph, is that we got to know people really, really well. And they, you know, they started to turn up every single week. You knew some of them had, you know, very difficult past, etc. So when we pivoted and we did the art kits, which I'll talk about a bit later, what we realised was people were vocalising on our group, WhatsApp group, about how they were struggling. So we had one guy really incredibly talented, and he hopped on, like, you know, the workshops still take place every Tuesday, you know, via the WhatsApp group. And he hopped on and said, like, you know, I've literally woken up, it was like 6 in the evening. He said, like, I know I have to, you know, I know Tuesday's my Accumulate day. He said, but I'm just getting drunk the whole time to deal with it. And then the next day I wake up with a hangover. And then, like, you know, I feel really, and, you know, then I just can't get out of bed and all this sort of stuff. And then you've got this sort of interaction on the WhatsApp group with people sort of saying, like, you know, we're all in this situation, you know, just come to the sessions, you'll find it's really good. You know, it's really a lovely sort of like support stuff going on. We had, you know, somebody yesterday talking about their own like addiction issues that they'd suffered, and that, you know, people were giving them encouragement. So, yeah, I mean, so that's great, it's fantastic, but it's obviously, it's really pertinent that you realise how difficult their situation is. You know, people being very, very open about their struggles and sharing those struggles, and I just feel very very sort of positive in a terrible way that at least they've got this group to like talk with that stuff with each other, and they feel that they, you know, feel confident that it's a closed group, it's not going to be, you know, and they feel comfortable in that environment. So yeah, so I know about it collectively, and of my understanding about the situation and what I'm hearing, but also on a personal level about what the Accumulate participants are now sharing with each other.
Mm. And that's amazing to hear about the WhatsApp group, because I was really interested to ask a little bit about how digital communication and this kind of like remote distance form of interaction was working for you and for the people that you work with at the moment. Because I think a major thing that we're interested in with these conversations about care and community, that so much of the work that we do with community groups is about kind of bringing people together, is about fostering environments and kind of empathy. And I was kind of wondering how that's been impacted by the kind of new conditions.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're all well, the first thing is, you know, you sort of say about discrimination, you know, I suppose it links, it's about digital literacy. You know, we've all got laptops and phones and, you know, goodness knows what, and often people just don't, and they just don't know how to use it. So we had the WhatsApp group, right, which had about, I don't know, 25 people on it, however many people coming to the Accumulate project. So that became the vehicle that we started, that was our base vehicle for when we started to do the pivot. So we did these like photo workshops on that, like photo challenges and stuff like that. And then we set up another project, which was they had to draw 100 objects in a sketchbook. And so, and how we pivoted is that we, you know, purchased all of the stuff and we sent it out to each of these people because we had their addresses. And then we set up, and then they were still using the WhatsApp group, but then we set up something which is called a Padlet page. Have you ever heard of Padlet? And that's like a community page, but very, very easy. You can just upload. And so when they were sending me stuff via WhatsApp, I was loading it up onto this Padlet page, which I can send you the link for. And then, and that was really, really great. They really loved the challenge, and I could see how they were interacting with each other. And then I did this, so we did that, and we've used Skype and we've used Zoom as well. And it is exactly as you're saying, Ali, is that they don't even load up the stuff to Padlet by themselves. You know, I have to do it. So they post it on WhatsApp and I do it. And then Skype, there's always a bit of a problem. Zoom, like bandwidth, in getting on the internet, sometimes there's a challenge in some hostels, you know, and they're just finding it very difficult because their only bit of, you know, interaction is via their phone. So, you know, so it's really tough if it's not the you know, they can't, haven't got all the software or whatever. So there's a lot more difficulties related to that. Having said all of that, we have run last week, I think, live workshops via WhatsApp where we put up videos at certain, like, you know, at 1:30, then at 2, and then they had to do stuff before the next video went up. And that we ran actually in collaboration with an architect firm called AHMM, which are in Clerkenwell Road, so really near to Autograph. And it was a drawing challenge, and it was a drawing challenge that actually turned into what they were drawing, turns into buildings. And that was just brilliant. So you had the architects on it, I had the Accumulate participants on it, I had, you know, the lead tutor Tori, she was on it, you know, and then as soon as they were like posting up their photos, I was downloading it and I was putting it on the Padlet site. It was like, look, I was exhausted at the end of it, but it was really all go. But then, so we're going to build on that actually this afternoon. We're going to be doing another one. So yeah, so the digital has presented some challenges if you want to try and get everybody onto a Zoom call. You know, they're not, you know, timekeeping's not great, all of that. But we are running, alongside this project, we're running a podcasting project, and that is run via Skype, and we have like regularly like 7-8 people attending that. So that's because that's like a separate longer term project that we're doing via that.
Amazing. And so I guess part of dealing with the difficulties around digital communication has been this idea of the art kits that you've been producing. How did
God.
I think you were saying that your front room has become a kind of,
oh my God,
production space.
It's the front room and the kitchen now. It's like, and the hallway. It's mad. So yeah, what's going to say? Yeah, so when we set up first of like sketchbooks and everything, and I thought, okay, we're doing this. It's great, but then you're hearing all of these noises from the wider community, you know, of hostels, and you know, the thing with the emergency accommodation about, you know, how that community is really, really struggling. And I thought, right, well, if we can expand it, we could send this out to more than the, you know, the 25, because within the art kit you get the materials you need for a specific activity, and you get like the full instructions. If you're not on digital, you're going to know exactly what you want to do. And it, you know, and the objective behind that is that I didn't want to buy just, you know, stuff from the pound shop. I wanted it to look, there's nothing wrong with the pound shop, but I wanted it to look real quality, like really something lovely that, you know, that makes you feel good that you've even got it. Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of a really nice sketchbook or nice felt pens or whatever, and it's all packed individually, etc. So yes, we put in a bid to Crisis to say, right, you know, well, no, first of all, I went out to all the hostels on my list and I said, who would be interested if we were to set this up, you know? And we had like responses like immediately, yeah, we would. So then I put in a bid to Crisis to do that, and we got the bid, and then we started to send them out. And initially, I think we were on about 200 or so, which was still huge, and we're now on over 550. Like the demand is like through the roof. We've done all sorts of different stuff. We've done like tapestry, we've done felt making, we've got a collage kit that's going to be sent out this week. We've got a selfie project, which is going to be purely digital, going on this afternoon. So yeah, we've been really, and I've been really trying to engage as much as I can, like the wider creative community as well, for them to get involved and, you know, come up with ideas and, you know, to work with them. And yeah, so it's worked really, really well. It's really great response. And, you know, we understand that, you know, it's being used. I mean, I think what's right, we could be sending out 550 and 12 people could be using it. But my other side, my logic said, if only 10%, like 55, spent 2 to 3 hours on this project and felt really good about themselves and like what they'd achieved in that afternoon, then absolutely fine.
Have you felt like having to make all these changes and adaptations to the way you work has made you kind of think differently about ideas of care and community, and the way that you and Accumulate relate to the people that you work with? I'm just thinking that idea of you in your house packaging art materials with your daughter feels like a really kind of intimate and personal thing, even though you don't necessarily know who that
Yeah.
might go to or who might use it.
Yeah, I mean, literally, you're sending, you know, 40 kits to a hostel. You know, you're not interacting with the end user. I've got no contact with them. I don't know who they are, anything. Whereas, you know, on the other side, obviously, when we work with Accumulate, you really know who you're working with. So I really don't know who I'm working with in this way. I mean, you know, from a public sector point of view, evaluation will be tough to get to that end user and to get that, you know, those feedback bits back from them and we've recognised it might be more challenging than usual. I think what I've learned from this is, you know, the thing about the Accumulate project, it's a really great project for those that are able to attend and engage with it. So in a way, it's quite a privilege, you could say, because it's really high-end education. It's, you know, it's great projects. We have great exhibitions and everything. And so, but it's exclusive, right? Because we can only have 20, 25 people engage with this. What we've done through this project, and what my learning is actually we've transferred that experience through the art kits to this wider community. So they get, you know, the great quality art materials, a beautifully designed instruction sheet. They can go, you know, and go onto the Padlet site. There'll be videos there. They can post their work up there. So we've got that other sort of sense of community through this project, which I'd never have done otherwise. You know, whether we'd continue it post-COVID, there's a bit of me which sort of says maybe we should do, because, you know, it doesn't, you know, for people who are unable to come to the sessions, they could still engage with something very meaningful in this way. So, you know, that's all up for grabs. You know, we're also looking about, you know, advancing those people that have engaged. If we have engaged with such a huge community, what more could we do?
Mm.
You know, is there something else we can do through online learning? Can we get it to that stage that they would engage with a course of activity which would be purely online, you know? And then people could, you know, be involved with that, you know, not fixed to location, not fixed to the fact that they've got to get to Autograph on a Tuesday afternoon. within their own time, if they've got other commitments or whatever. So yeah, so that's what I never would have thought about it without this situation, but we are definitely looking at those possibilities, and also what I really got to understand was, some hostels are brilliant. They've got people that offer, trainers or whatever that would offer some creative activity. But if there's only 2 people in that hostel that want to do something creative, they're not going to get somebody, to facilitate that, because it's just not financially viable. So those 2 people are rejected from something which might be very beneficial to them. And I thought, well, through this art kit project, because it's like higher end, they can still get involved in it. They don't have to be excluded. So there's all of that to think about. And coupled with that was the other bit, which I was thinking about, right, even if a hostel wanted to do it, but they didn't have a facilitator. They wanted to put on a creative activity, but they didn't have a facilitator who had those skills. With this project, with the Art Kit project, it's fine, because it literally is like a step-by-step instruction. So it's a bit like, you don't know how to, I don't know, make a cake. And so what you do is you get all the ingredients sent to you with the instructions and a little video. And so you just follow it step by step, and you don't have to be Jamie Oliver, but you're still going to make the cake at the end. You know what I mean? So it actually enables the support workers to do something like that as much as the participants. And it's only now I'm realising the potential of a project like this.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads me to want to ask a little bit about some of the other relationships that you have, because I think something that I've always found really important about Accumulate as a project is that you have these relationships with social care organisations. So you're working with hostels, and that feels like an really important part of the way the project works. And given that this is this kind of moment of change and upheaval, if you like, I was wondering if that had opened up any new ways in which you're working with those spaces, and if there was a kind of if you felt like that was going to change anything kind of in the future.
Only in the respect that there's a barrier, because we're not engaging with the youth, like the participant, because we have to go via the hostel. So we literally are sending out, as I said, just to addresses all over London, etc. We are getting engagement from hostels that we had struggled to engage with before, interestingly, because they had their own initiatives and their own programs. So which is great, fantastic. So there was there was no incentive for them to engage with Accumulate. Because of COVID, they've had to stop all of their training and all of their facilitation. So they've come to Accumulate. So we've actually got relationships with new organisations that we just would not have been able to break through that barrier of communication to get to the right person. And all of a sudden, we're getting that happening now. So there's, it's been a real benefit for us. Our reach has expanded beyond who we normally work with. We're getting calls from psychiatrists that are working in hostels where they've got, where the residents have got much deeper mental health issues. So we're doing now work with that group. We're never even known to have engaged with them. And because people can do it and not have to, if they've got very high anxiety about leaving, their accommodation or other, difficulties, this overcomes those barriers. It makes it that quality Accumulate art, creative learning experience is enabled for people who wouldn't have normally been able to access it for whatever reason. So so we've built new relationships. And I think also, I was speaking to one, very large hostel group who have really engaged with this project. And they said because they're such a large group, their challenge was actually to pivot quickly, like to know what to do, how we're going to do it. They had to work, across so many hostels. And because we just went in and said, look, here we go, they went, brilliant solution, and it's because we were particularly small. Sometimes I'm sure, I don't know if you have that experience at Autograph or not, but, you know, Accumulate is particularly small. We work with a lot of freelancers. You know, we haven't got that huge staff and huge premises. It's particularly small. So when it comes to a situation like this, that small is a real asset, because you can be so flexible and you can make, I mean, literally it was a conversation on the phone with all the tutors together, you know, from the Book of Homelessness, and we said, right, what are we going to do? And literally on that conversation, we said, this is what we're doing. End up, you know, we just did it. And that flexibility and that ability to be particularly innovative under these circumstances has really benefited Accumulate.
Yeah, brilliant.
I feel like a politician, don't I? I should do public speaking.
You should. You're good at it, Marice.
It's a teacher in me. It's a teacher in me. Shut up.
I was wondering if you had any kind of insights in terms of the people that you've been working with around the kind of bigger kind of picture for people experiencing homelessness at the moment. I know that there were certain plans around people having access to housing, like from the government, but I don't know if, you know, you're on the ground, and I think that there's a perspective that you probably have that, you know, we don't really see from kind of media representations, and I was wondering if you had any kind of viewpoints on that at all.
You know, it's a real concern. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of the emergency accommodation, like people in hotels. All of a sudden, we're sending out stuff to a travel lodge, like, you know, on the Blackwall Tunnel or something like that, you know, because that's where they're being, you know, located. You know, we've got lots of that happening, right? And I just think, right, well, what happens post-COVID, you know? What happens to all of those people? And I know how many people it is. And I'm only dealing with a little drop in the ocean, because, you know, we're sending out these kits. I know how many, you know, are people that we're working with that are in those accommodations. And yeah, like, what does happen post-COVID to that group? That's a big concern of mine, you know. So there's that aspect that that worries me, because we've got a temporary solution to what is a really significant long-term problem. And if we're talking about like new ways of working and the new normal and all this sort of stuff, well, what is that really for those who are deprived and, you know, are vulnerable? You know, what have we learnt through this? So yeah, that's the first thing. And you know, my only hope is that we come out of this with a much more inclusive society. I do not think it will happen because of the things we've discussed. Yeah, that's my main insight, I suppose. If you're asking me, you know, what do I think about, particularly about that community at this moment? I think mental health is going to be off the scale for that group. Absolutely off the scale. You know, such a challenge, you know, and so hard, and all that sort of, like, you know, the hopes of escaping that situation. What does, you know, 0-hour contracts look like for that group? Because, you know, those are the ones that might have taken up those, you know, those types of opportunity. And now, you know, if you have bigger unemployment, does that mean it's all shifted? You know, there's all sorts of things, you know, routes out of that. I hope education will become more inclusive, you know, that they'll really see this as a time to reconfigure who's included and who is excluded. So yeah, we can hope for that. Whether it's going to happen, whether there's going to be the budget for all of that. You know, at the moment, from a Accumulate point of view, we've been able to resource what we're doing because we've bid for quite a few projects and we've been successful. We had the crisis one, and we got you know, money from London Community Fund. So so we got another smaller charity. So we got that resourcing very, very quickly. Now, you know, Ali, how tough that is normally to get bids, right? So what does it look like post-COVID for, you know, the vulnerable? Will there be the support and the finance available to to work with that group and to make sure they're part of this new economy and this new society that we want to build, you know. So we have to look not just now, we have to look like, what does that look like 18 months, 2 years time, if, you know, the country is seriously in debt? Who will be the first to suffer, and how do we support?
Mm. And do you think, I mean, I guess you do, the role that kind of art can play in this moment where people are struggling in terms of isolation? You've kind of outlined some of the particular challenges that homeless people are facing, and I just was wondering what role you felt like art was playing in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some very obviously there's projects that have been pivoting, is that, you know, and sort of amplifying the well-being aspect of creativity for people who have experiencing certain difficulties, whether that's about participation, whether it's about getting your voice heard, you know, all that sort of stuff, you know, is those projects are going on. There's a really good initiative called With One Voice, who are like a specialist organisation for arts and homelessness, and they started to gather what on earth is going on, because there's all of this good, you know, resource that could be shared, etc. So they started to gather, and there's lots going on. There's choirs going on, there's writing projects going on, there's photography projects going on, and they also came up with this really great initiative about, you know, like sort of almost like a mobile library that could be taken around, which has art activities on it and books that can go into hostels and under these circumstances. So people in the sector are very, very engaged and know now it is really critical. If people are in isolation, they do have creativity, they do get involved in something that they feel they're doing something of purpose and of meaning, and it's important to them and gives them, you know, makes them feel good, because God, you know, it's really, you know, the likelihood that you're going to be self-isolating in a hostel under such difficult circumstances and you're going to exit it feeling, you know, with real positive mental health or feeling really good about yourself, is and able to, you know, to change your life in, you know, into a better sort of direction. I mean, it's really pretty low, let's face it, you know. So you know, creativity is a means of actually working with those negative feelings and emotions and doing some good. So absolutely central. We all recognise it in the sector. We're all trying to do as much as possible to help there. The issue is what will happen on exit. Will we still get that support and recognition that this is really worthwhile and worth investing in, and should be central to any sort of intervention when you're looking at this type of disadvantaged community. So, you know, as much as they do in every hostel, you know, training on employability, or they do a lot to say money management, they should also have creative engagement as part of that, because it's critical for well-being. And unless somebody feels good about themselves and has positive mental health, they're not going to be able to move their life forward. And they're at far greater risk of all the other things that we know about, like substance abuse and antisocial behaviour and, you know, negative sort of social engagement, abusive relationships, etc.
Yeah. If we could end with...
Well, it's going on forever. Yeah, carry on.
Forever. If there was one silver lining that you identify coming out of this period, what would it be?
I think how you can work differently and still realise those social impacts which are central to an organisation like Accumulate. You know, like the fact that we're doing what we're doing. Okay, yeah, I do know the front room is full of art materials, and I do know it's post-COVID. Hopefully, it's not going to be like that. But it's meant that we can still impact positively without the face-to-face, and we can engage a far wider audience through that and through using digital in like low tech ways. You know what? You don't have to be super fancy. You can realize it, you know, but you just got to think. You've got to just scale down your expectations, and you can still get the same return. And I suppose that's what I've learned actually from it.
Brilliant.
Crazy man! We're crazy man!